Hey, this is Web3 Talks. The rule of this podcast is simple. We only talk with people who have hands-on Web3 building experience. So if you are a hacker, entrepreneur, or investor, you can get inspired by their stories, lessons, and fuck-ups. My name is Mac, and I'm hosting this pod. If you want to stay in touch, go to twitter.com/Web3Talks, click the link in the pinned tweet, and join our Discord community. Let's go. Today's guest is Dennison Bertram, founder of Tally, a tool that helps DAOs such as ENS, Compound, Gitcoin pull together to vote and organize their actions. And obviously, we'll talk a lot about it. But before we get into the product, could you tell us about your story? Because I know that you've been in crypto for quite a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in crypto for more than 10 years at this point. So it's kind of funny. There's kind of a meme of saying we're so early, it's so early. And it's true. It is very early in crypto, but not that early anymore. It has been a long time. Like people have been here building stuff for a long time. And something that I think is important there is that people have been building in crypto before there was really hype to building in crypto, right? Like there are a lot of people who build in crypto because they always thought it was a good idea and they always liked it, and I sort of consider myself one of those people where I always liked the idea of it. And that's what always attracted to me. And that's why I'm still here, right? Because I just simply enjoy it. It's something fun to build in. I got into crypto kind of by chance. I was a fashion photographer and artist for a long time. I built a creative technology company that helped fashion brands be more digital native at a time when that was actually a thing. The high-end fashion brands took a long time to get into the digital space and be digitally native. For many years, many of them didn't even have e-commerce. So for a while, I sort of transitioned from being just a fashion photographer into being like a creative technologist, I like to call it. And then, I came across the Bitcoin white paper pretty early on, probably like 2011 or something like that. It made a lot of sense to me. 2008 was a pretty shocking event for people, myself included. And, I remember the dot-com bubble and, the 2008 collapse just really wiped out a lot of people's sort of like life trajectories, which today people don't really recognize. But, it really changed the trajectory of kind of everyone who was like of working age at that time. So, I read the white paper, I got into it, really was into Bitcoin, a lot of the early altcoins, did a lot of different projects in crypto at the time. I ran one of the first Bitcoin exchanges in the Czech Republic in 2012 when Bitcoin was still kind of like monopoly money. Built a few other projects, eventually found my way to Ethereum. That wasn't as direct as I would have liked to have been. I wish I hadn't been a sort of like maximalist early on and just sort of saw the light earlier.
Okay.
But came to Ethereum. I really enjoyed the ecosystem. It felt like I really loved the early Ethereum sort of like messaging around the world computer and how it was like something that we could like build on. Solidity was very accessible. Community felt very welcoming. It was just like a cool place to be and cool way to be building the future. So continued in there. I worked for OpenZeppelin for a while as developer advocate. I built something called dApp Hero, which was kind of like a no-code tool for building dApps in Ethereum. That was a little bit too early. And then I came to Tally, which is building DAO tooling. DAO tooling is something I'd always been interested in. The DAO was a pretty interesting event itself. And then, there have been other DAO things sort of early on, 2016, 2017. It seemed a little bit too early at the time just because it wasn't really clear what we needed DAOs for. But then, when Compound launched the Comp token and Compound governance, it seemed really obvious that like, DAOs are really going to be this like future of like magic internet society, as I like to say it. And we're going to need a lot of tools to help us do that.
Talking about Tally, like, why have you focused on this problem? Because like DAOs have pretty like a few problems that they can, face when they are growing. Why have you tackled this particular one?
DAOs for me are interesting. I like coordination problems. I like the idea of communities. This feels to me something very special about Ethereum or smart contracts. As we were sort of talking pre-show, I'm not really super inspired by like DeFi. I think DeFi is fine and all that, but it's just not something that gets me super excited. I like the idea that we can build organizations on top of blockchain that feels a lot more powerful. Maybe it's not as immediate, the obvious of the benefits. There's this talk that I sometimes give around this idea of like magic internet society, and magic internet society being this like progression of taking these like early sort of sometimes wild primitives and making them real. So, I sort of talk about how Bitcoin was magic internet money. And once we had magic internet money and not before, was it possible to build like magic internet banks? You look at something like Maker. And then once you have magic internet banks, you can start to build magic internet finance, which is like DeFi. And then to like run all these things, you really need magic internet organizations, which are DAOs. But what I think we build towards is what sort of originally attracted me in blockchain in the first place, like a fundamentally reconstituting of society. So I think that, where you go from DAOs is like magic internet society, where we actually use the internet's full potential to actually run society on that. And to get there, I think we need better tools. DAOs are early. It's not sort of obvious how we get to magic internet society from here just yet, but I think it's happening slowly. And yeah, Tally is, my co-founder and I, we felt like this is really a great opportunity, building something that is kind of like a product, right? Like something that people actually need, does something useful, makes their lives better, and then allows them to really express their creativity. I think, when I think about like the difference between like building in DeFi, maybe you can help people make money, but in like DAOs, like if you can help people build DAOs, I don't really like the world of DAOs that people may build is kind of unlimited, right? So there's this kind of like enthusiasm and excitement of like, oh, wow, we could build tools that allow people to build things that we can't imagine yet.
Yeah, like it seems like it's like the more like a meta level, because like when you help people to organize and coordinate, you help all areas of business and things that people can do, like finance, but also like construction and like, supply chain and like everything, because you're kind of like helping at the most fundamental level. How exactly does Tally help DAOs to coordinate? Like what does your product do, and how they are different from Snapshot, which is also like the household name, and working in a more or less the same area? And many people confuse these two tools. So I'm wondering
so on a practical level, Tally is a tool that helps you start, join, and grow decentralized organizations. And what that means is if you have an idea and you want to build it on the blockchain, on Ethereum, you can use the OpenZeppelin governor contracts, which is, comes from OpenZeppelin. It's a library of smart contracts that are sort of plug and play. It's what everyone uses for all their projects. It's the standard. You can build a DAO using these smart contracts and you can plug it into Tally. On Tally, this is where you can organize and run your community, your DAO. So this is where you can allow people to delegation of their votes, create proposals to vote on proposals. Very importantly, allows you to look at who are the other participants in your ecosystem, right? So you can look at how other people are voting. If you're going to delegate your vote to someone, you can see who you're delegating to. Have they created proposals in the past? How have they voted in the past? It allows you to share votes very easily so you can rally support for your idea. It's a very practical tool for doing the hands-on work that is necessary to run your DAO, right? And Tally isn't necessarily very opinionated on the kind of DAO. We have a lot of kinds of DAOs that are run on Tally, but rather it allows you to not focus on the mechanical sort of like just implementation details of running your DAO. You can be building a DAO around lemonade stands and you can use Tally. You can be building Uniswap and you can use Tally. And in both cases, you don't have to think about like, oh, how am I going to actually vote on things? How am I actually going to show proposals? It's all there, right? And we're building a lot of features around that. To your second question, how is it different than Snapshot? And there are other tools like Tally out there beyond Snapshot. But actually, there's a very big difference between Snapshot and Tally. Snapshot is off-chain voting. Currently, they are building a new thing called Snapshot X, which is going to be a little bit different. But currently, Snapshot, the way people use Snapshot today, is an off-chain polling solution. So the important thing about Tally to know is Tally currently is on-chain. We've just added some support for off-chain polls, but Tally decisions are made on-chain. That means that the outcome of the decision is final, right? When people vote to pay someone $100 on Tally and the vote passes, that person will get paid $100. No one from the core team can influence the outcome of that, right? Like the people are the absolute final say. They are the true power of the DAO. And Snapshot is a little bit different because Snapshot is off-chain. Someone is responsible for translating the outcome of a decision on Snapshot to some sort of action on chain. Now, it's very useful for off-chain decisions, right? Like, let's say you say, oh, should we host our party at this club or that club, right? And then on Snapshot, you vote for club A. Well, the core team is the one who's going to organize the party. So they say, all right, people want the party at club A. Let's go host it at club A. But the important difference here is the voters don't actually decide to host the party at club A. It's the core team that decides to host it at club A. But the voters can just use Snapshot to give their opinion about hosting it at club A, right? And this is a very important distinction because there's a number of DeFi protocols that use Snapshot where they say, hey, should we do A or should we do B? And the voters say, we want to do A. And the core team says, no, we're going to do B. And there's nothing that the people can do about it, right? There's a number of very big, famous DeFi protocols that use Snapshot. And it ends up being a situation where you can vote for anything you want as long as what the core team wants, right? So in that case, Snapshot can be used as an opinion gathering tool, which a lot of DAOs that are on Tally use Snapshot to get the opinion of people, and then they go create the proposal that actually gets executed on chain. Or people kind of use it as a stand-in for a DAO, but in reality, it's not decentralized, right? First of all, Snapshot is not decentralized. All this information is stored in Snapshot servers. And truth be told, Snapshot could alter that, right? Like Snapshot could censor votes, could, prevent people from voting. They're not going to do that, of course, right? I trust them. I think they're a great team. But it's not a decentralized solution, right? So if the government shows up with a gun to their head, you'll never know it. Right. But furthermore, the outcome of the votes aren't actually executable on chain. Right. So you're still relying on some group of people to make the decision. And that's not decentralization. Right. That's not why I'm here in blockchain. And that's not true. That's simply not like Web3. Right. Like that's, if you have a DAO, Wonderland Finance, I love to use the example where Daniele, sort of when the whole thing was falling apart, he had this famous Discord post where he said, enough, I am the DAO now, I'm going to run it. And then people started making the joke that DAO standing for Daniele Autocratic Organization, right? A real DAO on Tally, that doesn't happen. Certainly one person could buy up all the voting tokens and now they control the DAO. But that's a different situation. In that situation, all the community members said, fuck it, we don't care anymore. We're leaving. Take my tokens. Bye. But in the other example, the Daniele organization, you had someone who was pretending like it was a decentralized organization, pretending like your vote made an impact, pretending like your voice had some sort of power, when in reality, no, it doesn't. And there are other organizations today who do the same thing. And that's a very fundamentally different kind of organization.
Okay, so like trying to rephrase what you said is like the way I understand it is like Snapshot is like Web 2.5 in a way that it's something between Web 2 and Web 3, but Tally is like pure Web 3 solution. And because it's more like a direct democracy where you don't have any buffer between your votes and actions that happen on chain. And also the other difference that I understood is that like Tally is a great tool for important decisions. But like, you can use Snapshot for like smaller decision, like a party, because like you don't need them on chain, like, unless it's like, you're about to spend like $100 million, then maybe like it's good to have this decision on chain, but like otherwise it's not that crucial.
Some communities are really decentralized. A great example is the Dope Wars DAO. This is a DAO that I started, but I do not run. It is entirely its own autonomous community. They use Tally to pay one another their invoices, right? They have this treasury collectively. And rather than trusting some individual to pay their invoice, they create proposals together where they say, hey, all of these different people did these different things that in Discord we said we would pay for. So let's pay them. They have this phrase, hustlers pay their debts. And they use Tally to pay one another out their invoices. And this is really important because what would happen is if you had one person responsible for paying out the invoice, maybe he's got a friend that always has like a good idea that always seems to get paid for and funded. And you never really can know for sure, are the people who are getting paid by this organization the people who really are bringing value that the rest of the organization thinks brings value? Or are they just best friends to the person on the multisig or the people on the multisig?
Yeah, it's a very important problem. I remember I had a conversation with Zaki from Coordinate exactly about this problem where, when people vote with their own money, because like treasury is like for everyone, when they vote with their own money, this is like a very believable, very like true way of saying, okay, you've done a good job because like I gave a share of my pie to you. So I must really believe that it was a good job.
Yeah. It's also very important for signaling the validity of decisions, right? Like if you pay someone $1 million and they do a shit job, right? Whose fault is it? Well, all of our faults. We all agreed to give them the money. If somebody like didn't vote, well, you didn't participate. We could have used your opinion, right? If you voted against it, well, yeah, unfortunately, turns out you were right, but it's democracy, and most of us wanted to pay for it, right? It's very different if one person makes that decision, or like 3 out of 5 people make that decision. Right?
Okay, and like like today among your users, you have many big names like Gitcoin, Compound, Pull Together. Like, how have you acquired these users, these DAOs, and how do you do it today?
So we are one of the primary interfaces for the Governor framework. We decided to go with the Governor framework early on because we felt like it was the simplest, most intuitive, and most secure framework for voting. That's why folks like Uniswap, that has one of the largest treasuries, use it. Because it is easy to reason about. You understand how it's going to work, right? If the majority of people vote yes, something happens. There's no weird games around game theory of how maybe something can work. And it's very secure. And it also works very nicely with how you normally think about tokens. You have one token, you have one vote. It's been expanded. Now it also supports NFTs. So you have one NFT, one vote, right? So we also, we think that we're doing a very good job. So folks like to be on Tally, but also because we are decentralized, we're not decentralized, but the smart contracts, Ethereum is decentralized because these are public smart contracts. Choosing to use Tally does not mean that you can't use someone else, right? Like you can have your DAO on Tally and have it on Boardroom, right? With Snapshot, if Snapshot disappears or changes, well, you're just on Snapshot, right? There's no independent, purely like decentralized way of seeing the Snapshot data, right? Because that's coming from their server. But for the blockchain, all our data comes from the blockchain, right? If you don't like Tally's interface, if it's not beautiful enough, or if you don't trust it, you can build your own and you'd have the same access to the same data, right? You can make decisions on other interfaces, right? So again, this is sort of like the question around decentralization. You want to be on Tally because it's kind of one of the best tools out there to use, but also the choice to use Tally doesn't mean that other people can't also provide interfaces to your thing. Or you can't build your own interface. So a great example is Nouns DAO is on Tally, but Nouns DAO also has its own interface, right? So that's like one of the big reasons, right? Like we are this like great tool, but we're also, working on top of decentralization.
And like, back then, as I understand, like being decentralized was very important for early users. But I'm wondering, like, how have you met them? Were you just going around conferences, meeting them on Twitter, Telegram, or like any other place?
All of the above. We just ran a big DAO conference here in New York called DAO.NYC. It was a beautiful conference, really amazing. So a lot of people come through activations like that where they understand. The DAOs that are on Tally do a great job of like selling the vision of Tally, right? It really helps that Uniswap is there, Compound is there, Nouns is there, Dope Wars is there, right? So if you're saying, oh, I want to build a decentralized video game DAO, you look at Dope Wars and you say, well, that's working. What do they use? They use Tally, right? So then you come to Tally. We've made it very easy to add your DAO on Tally. We're trying to make that easier. We want to make it just substantially easier for people to be able to create these organizations. So the other thing is that, we're supporting a framework that we don't build ourselves, right? There's a lot of DAO tools out there which are awesome. They both build their framework and they build the interface. We are supporting, now it's in the Open Zeppelin library, as I mentioned before. So when people go and they build their smart contracts, they're like, oh, I get my ERC20 from Open Zeppelin, I get my ERC71 from Open Zeppelin, I get my roles and permissions from Open Zeppelin, and oh, look, they have a DAO thing. I'll get my DAO from Open Zeppelin, right? So it's very useful that like we have this other large community that builds on this and that we support it, right? So that has been a very sort of like natural flow. And the other thing is we've just been here for a while. We've been building for, 2 years now or so, maybe more. So, we've just been in the market for a long time.
Yeah. And I think in a moment when it wasn't saturated, like it's still not saturated when it comes to DAO voting tools, like you've been at the start of really like real use cases for DAOs. So I guess it's pretty important. Like, I think you might be a person that has seen, I don't know, hundreds, maybe thousands of DAOs in your life. So I would like to ask you one thing, because, when I talk with founders here, they are pretty reluctant to turn their organizations into DAOs. Sometimes because they are worried it will slow down the project. Sometimes because they are hesitant because of the chaos that might, just come because of too many ideas. So what has been the thing that the most effective DAOs have done? The ones that you've seen that were outperforming the ones that were, these stereotypical chaotic group chat DAOs that never makes a decision. What makes a good DAO?
Yeah. What makes a good DAO? Well, I kind of want to respond to your first thing and then answer what makes a good DAO, because what makes a good DAO is very subjective, I think. But the first part is for founders who are hesitant to make a DAO, I would say that they're not building a DAO, right? Like for people who are like, oh, I don't know if we really want to turn it into a DAO. My answer is kind of like, yeah, don't. Clearly, it's not a DAO idea if you're scared about making a DAO, right? And the reasons that they normally give for not wanting to do DAO are exactly what you said. There'll be chaos in decision making. It'll be a lot slower. And in those situations, those founders, they want to be the boss. They want to be CEO and just build it. And that makes total sense. Total sense, right? If you came up with an idea and you want to build it and you have a really strong opinion on how to do it and you have a team of people who really trust your judgment and want to build it with you, don't build a DAO. You're building a company, right? Like that's what it is. You're building a startup, you're building a company. Now, maybe some point in the future, you want to DAOify it. And I would say that DAOs, there's a term called exit to community, which is a very interesting concept, right? DAOs don't IPO on the stock market. What they do is they, quote unquote, exit to the community, right? So you've been building something as a founder, eventually you kind of want to stop. Most people don't want to build things for 50 years. They don't want to be there forever. Things need new juice, new lifeblood. But they can't do it until they get to like a certain point, right? Like you kind of got to finish what you came to build, right? And ideally educate people along the way so that there is someone to take over when you quote unquote exit to community. An exit to community is when you essentially say, okay, we've gotten to this point where now we want to decentralize this thing that we built. Some things are very hard to build in a decentralized manner, right? Imagine building something from day one as a DAO, right? And this depends on what it is, right? Some things start as DAOs and should start as DAOs, right? Dope Wars had to start as a DAO. Otherwise, it would never have worked, right? But other things maybe have to start as a product in a company because you say, well, we are going to build some sort of cool new technology, right? And there's a whole bunch of people in the Telegram channel. And they say, well, maybe we should build something totally different. And you're like, well, yeah, but I want to build this thing. And they're like, well, we voted and we don't want to build that thing. We want to build the other thing. Well, yeah, that's a bad way to like build a product on day one, right? Mm-hmm. So what you do, and then, I'll answer like your first question. What you do is you build the thing you're trying to build with the goal of one day exiting to the community. And to do that, you have to bring the community along to some degree. Now, maybe day one, it's just you and your team. Day two, maybe you start to talk to the people who use your product. Day three, the people who use your product maybe give input on what the roadmap should be. Day four, you start testing them more with it. Day five, you start to hire people from the community. You hire people from the community to like represent the company in the community. Day six, you start to make these working groups inside the community which control parts of the company, right? You gradually decentralize. You gradually become a DAO. So the closer you get to like achieving your goal is also the time when you're ready for other people to take the lead, right? So that they understand what you've been building, why you've been building it, what your vision is, and they can have a vision that's aligned with the direction of this future. Now, maybe they do something else once you get there, but like you've brought them along so that they know what's going on. Because otherwise you say, hey, let's build a sandwich DAO and we're gonna have grilled cheese sandwiches, and people go, well, no, we want hamburgers. Someone else wants hot dogs. You're never going to get anywhere, right? Like you build grilled cheese sandwiches over and over and over, and eventually you have grilled cheese sandwich DAO, and the people are all into, have self-selected for grilled cheese and people, right? And it happens. Okay. So your other question is, what are the most effective DAOs out there? And that's a really subjective question because what are we evaluating it on? A lot of times people evaluate voter participation as success of a DAO. Oh, how many people participate in votes? And I really think that's a bad metric to use, right? For a lot of DAOs, there tends to be only a really small number of people who, one, care, and B, understand how it works in the first place, right? You can't build it doesn't make any sense to have a DAO for some super complicated DeFi protocol and ask some dude who you airdropped tokens to for having like touched your smart contracts once upon a time and say, hey, could you decide upon the risk parameters for the collateralization ratio of a new asset coming out of the platform? That person maybe doesn't know anything about what you're talking about, right? Which also points to another problem, which we probably won't get into, which is like, how do you distribute governance power, right? Like, how do airdrops work and are they effective, stuff like that. But the other thing is, what is the purpose of a DAO? Sometimes a DAO's purpose is to actually build something, right? We want to actually build X. If they never build X, is it a failure, right? Dope Wars, the goal kind of Dope Wars is to build this metaverse game around hip hop and like Grand Theft Auto and like music and the streets. Is it actually important if Dope Wars ever makes that game? I think a lot of people would say, yeah, it's important. It's a failure. They didn't make that game. But let's say for 10 years, these people all around the world, they check in every day. They're doing artwork. They're like coding cool stuff. They're playing with one another. They're doing votes. They're paying out one another. People have full-time jobs working on this idea for 10 years as their community and how they identify. After 10 years, there's no game. Are they a failure? Or is the actual purpose of this DAO to give purpose to these people? Is it actually just a community, right? So how you evaluate DAOs is very important here because some DAOs like Compound or Maker, their job is not necessarily to build anything new, right? Compound, the company, Compound Labs, built Compound the protocol before they turned it into a DAO. And once it became a DAO, the point of the DAO wasn't necessarily to build a new protocol. It was to run and manage this protocol, right? So from now on, if Compound still exists, if people still use it, it's probably a success. And I think they are very successful, even though a lot of people complain that Compound is like run by rich people, like it's an oligarchy, right? People complain about that, but it's still a community of people who care about something and have some knowledge about how to do it, and they do it. So it's very hard to like really pick favorites. Uniswap is very big DAO. They have a lot of money, but people complain that they don't do much, right? Like there aren't that many proposals in Uniswap. It's very hard to get something passed. There's a lot of disagreement. Maybe that's a reflection of like how Uniswap, the core team, feels about the DAO. Maybe that's a reflection of like how you distribute membership in the DAO. So maybe it's hard to get consensus because the token holders are there for profit, not because they think it's cool and they want to help build it, right? So all these things are really like different metrics. I would say if you're going to decide if your DAO is a success or not, you also have to figure out what time frame it needs to be a success over, right? Because Compound smart contracts will most likely live forever, right? So if Compound is still lending money 100 years from now, is it enough to say it's a success, right? But if Dope Wars builds a game within 1 year and then everyone goes, all right, good job, folks, we built a game, let's all go home, and then they never do anything else, is that a success? So I know that's not a very satisfying answer to the question of like, what's the best DAO out there? But I think that it's important to think about, what's the best company out there, right? Is Apple the best company because they make an amazing product and they have the most money? Maybe that's not how we decide what the metric of best is. So it's very subjective.
Mm-hmm. What governance models have you seen that worked for you in Tally and also for DAOs? I know that Tally, as far as I understand, is not decentralized yet. So I'm wondering, who makes what decisions, this kind of models, how do you share this executive power in your organization? How have you seen it been playing out in different DAOs?
Sure. So Tally is a company. It's a venture-backed startup. As a CEO, which is me, co-founder, my CTO, which is Raf Solari. And then we have teams, right, of people who work on things internally. And we try and all align around the vision and mission of Tally, which is to help people build DAOs with the long-term vision that one day people will build DAOs instead of building corporations. And that Tally will be one of the tools that helps make this possible, right? Even in a small organization like that, making decisions is still a challenge, right? Because I can't jump into the Zoom chat and tell everybody to do B if they all want to do A, right? You wouldn't have a team for very long if they just didn't trust your judgment and if they didn't feel ownership, right? We definitely run the company where people feel ownership and we want them to feel ownership, right? I don't have all the answers to actually how you build this. Maybe I have this great idea of what it should be, but I don't have all the answers on how we get there, right? There's this thing I like to say about hiring where if you sort of like messed up hiring is if you hire someone, they ask you, what should I do, right? Because the thing is, it's like, that's what I hired you for, right? Like you should know what to do. I don't know that. I can't be all things, right? Now, that's still a company. We're still a company. Maybe ideally one day we would be a DAO, but we're pretty far from that. But there's a lot of greater human capital that exists outside the sort of like official team structure that we have. I think that there are a number of teams which build DAOs. Pool Together is a great example. They started as a company and now they have built this big DAO. It is a big organization and they've done a fantastic job. I'm sure you're aware that they currently are fighting a lawsuit, which is feels really shitty. I'll be frank. It doesn't seem fair whatsoever. There are other teams that have started as DAOs, right? I think when you decide to be a DAO, there's also, there's a lot of different reasons you may want to build a DAO, right? All of which are valid, I think one really great example for building a DAO is if it's not safe to build your idea as a company or as an individual, right? What I'm talking about is things like Tornado Cash, right? Tornado Cash is an incredibly powerful and important tool for privacy, for financial privacy. Obviously, a lot of criminals use it, obviously. We build in this world knowing that a lot of our tools can be used for bad. And we hope that that is kind of an externality of the greater good, right? Like the greater good is privacy for everyone is a greater good than the individual externality of criminals using it. Building Tornado Cash as a company is extremely dangerous, right?
Yeah.
That is something that, like, any number of governments would love to put you in prison for forever, right? And if you think about it, Tornado Cash is software, right? And that's something that people, say, oh, you built this thing, you should go to jail. But wait a minute, software is speech, right? This is free speech, right? For me to say, hey, here's an idea, we're going to use some math and software, that's free speech, right? But governments will still put you in jail for it. So in situations like that, yeah, maybe you want to build this as a community of thousands of people around the world, right? Because if you build it as a company and you're located in San Francisco, they're going to find you and arrest you and put you into jail, right? So there's some businesses, there's some ideas that you simply want to be decentralized from the start, right? Because they are political ideas at their core, and you need a large upswell of people building it together to have any safety in doing it, right? Now, I'm sure this recording is probably going to come up at some congressional hearing at one point in the future, and they'll be like, Dennison supports criminals. And that's not true, right? But, not everywhere is America. Not everywhere has the same sort of like ideas. And there are some things that you build that, maybe just administrators in regulatory organizations would love to use as a way to define you as a criminal, help their own personal careers, and put you in jail, right? So a lot of DeFi, it's wild to see people trying to build new reserve currencies that don't have state support. There are tons of countries that would love to put you in jail for creating a new stablecoin, right? You, individual, think you're going to make money? No, that's what we do, put you in jail, right? Now, that actually isn't fair at all, right? Like, there's no supernatural being that says only states have the rights to make money, right? The state says only them have the right to make money, and then they shoot you if you say otherwise, right? For things like that, you probably want to build a DAO, right? Some ideas that people are working on today are DAOs that, in America, if you notice, like, the laws changed about abortion, and you might want to build a charity organization that makes sure that women around America have access to abortion. So you maybe get together a lot of people who will mail people abortion pills, right? That way you can use decentralization to get around laws that are unfair, unjust, infringe your human rights, right? That you might want to have a DAO, because maybe if you're organizing it in one of these states, that state would love to put you in jail for what you're trying to do, right? Now, on the flip side, though, if you're building Tally, right, probably nobody's going to arrest me for building a front end for DAOs, right? I don't necessarily need that decentralization, right? So I can build a company happily. I don't think I'm in any particular risk, or, certainly I hope not, right? Other people may build DAOs for other reasons. Seraph is a new LGBTQ plus DAO community. They're kind of like a hybrid company DAO community, kind of like Friends with Benefits, FWB. Now you want a DAO because the members are actually the value of the community, right? The DAO, kind of like Dope Wars as well, is actually just a shelling point for, hey, are you interested in queer rights? Are you interested in video games? Come here. This is where we are all at, talking and building on this kind of idea thing, right? So in that case, you're building a DAO for your interests, right? So there are other reasons that you build DAOs, right? There are things like developer DAO, which kind of falls into that category where it's a lot of people who want to be developers. So here's a community of developers helping one another, right? WGMI DAO is a DAO around training community managers, and they want to sell their services of community managers to other DAOs who are trying to build something, but they don't have community managers. So there's a lot of reasons why you'd build a DAO, some of which are legal, regulatory. Sometimes it's just the better product, right? Maybe the DAO is the thing that you're building. But regardless of what it is, we think you can build it on Tally.
Okay. What are the biggest challenges you see for DAOs right now? Like, in the last day of June 2022, what are the biggest challenges for DAOs that you've seen?
I think the biggest challenges for DAOs are tooling and understanding what a DAO is, right? The team at Snapshot is amazing. Snapshot is a very useful tool. But if you're building a DAO where you're taking donations from millions of people around the world and you're just going to have a multi-sig and use Snapshot, you need to be honest with yourself. Is that a DAO, right? This is something that happens a lot. It's a very efficient organization. It's very efficient for Dennison to say, hey, I'm building a charity organization. Give me the money and I will give it to somebody else, right? This is very efficient. I can make the decision quickly. I can make it easily. It can be done, right? But you can't stop me if I pay myself $400,000 a year for managing this money you gave me, right? And that is dangerous, right? Now, ideally, we build better tools to at least give transparency to that. And that's something that Tally will be helping, because people will continue to choose to build this kind of DAO where one person or two out of three people have all the money and all the control. I don't like it, but I understand why it exists and why it happens. And I see it kind of like a hybrid between decentralization and centralization, right? It's like somewhere between building a startup and building a wild community movement, right? Makes sense. There isn't anything wrong with that, but people need to understand what it really is, right? Like, maybe it should be called DAO-like. Constitution DAO was an awesome project, right? It fell apart because once they raised all this money and they tried to win the Constitution, they suddenly realized that there was an enormous legal liability that suddenly appeared, right? They raised $50 million, more or less, and they were going to buy the Constitution. Great. But from the government's point of view, they owe $25 million in tax, right? Because buying the Constitution is not some nonprofit activity, right? They're not registered as some nonprofit organization. It looks like 5 or 12 or how many people on the multi-sig got together and earned $50 million, and the government wants its money, right? So there's a lot of unanswered questions. The legal question is a huge problem for DAOs today, right? Like, who pays the tax in a DAO? I don't know. Is it fair if you can't? I come up with DAOs all the time. Am I supposed to pay the tax on a DAO? I don't think so. It's not my money. Certainly, like, in Dope Wars, I don't have control over this money. Like, it's not my money. Why should I be paying tax on that, right? How does that organization pay tax, right? Is it an American DAO? Do these people live in America? Who the fuck knows, right? Like, they're just Ethereum addresses, right? Like, what jurisdiction do they fall under? Maybe they should pay tax to the UN, right? Like, they're global organizations. Their headquarters is in the internet. Where does tax get paid on that, right? So the legal question is really big. I assume that this will probably get sorted out in the next coming years. I actually expect that it'll probably be solved pretty amicably, right? A lot of these people, I don't think the government's going to go sue Dope Wars for like getting together and trying to build a video game and making lots of artwork, right? Now maybe they'll go after Tornado Cash, right? Depends on like how big a target it becomes, right? North Korea, I think it was the one responsible for the Axie Infinity hack, right? If North Korea laundered $500 million through Tornado Cash, there is a point at which the US government will commit its resources, right? Like, and I do think it's incumbent upon Tornado Cash to make their tool more appealing to good uses rather than, just hiding your stolen money, right? Because if all the money in Tornado Cash is stolen money, maybe it's going to be a hard time arguing that privacy is a fundamental right if the only people who use it are criminals, right? So I think I'm probably getting off track here, but
no, like you ask rhetorical, as far as I understand, like many good questions here and many open-ended questions. So it really makes me think. So like, if the like the only user of Tornado Cash is 0x Seafood, and like, it won't work for a long time. But like we talked a lot about challenges. So like, imagine that you have a magic wand and you can fix one thing about Web3. What would it be?
I would say give it legal clarity. You're going to regulate it. Finally regulate it. Stop playing games. Just regulate it. Right? Give us legal clarity about what you think, right? So that people can build knowing what to do. Most people want to do the right thing, but you won't tell them what the right thing is, right? So for me, I think the fix I would want is legal clarity.
Yeah, like some time ago, I was thinking about law, like, that law is like a very, very old piece of software written in this obscure language where you need people who can translate it to other normal people. And like, it's not like smart contract, like, it's a smart contract where a developer can change it if they decide to change it. So like, who would build a product in this kind of environment? Like very few people. But but you have to build company in this kind of environment, which is pretty nuts.
Yeah, you have to build a company, and only the richest companies can build global companies.
Yeah.
Whereas DAOs, you can build a global company, global DAO in a few minutes.
Yeah. So Dennison, like, what were, you are a crypto OG, you've been here for like 10 years. What has been the most mind-blowing projects that you have seen? Something that, either inspired you or just, blew your mind when it comes to creativity? It doesn't need to be useful. It can just be, this weird way of connecting crypto dots.
Yeah, I think there's three that come to mind. One is Ethereum. People really didn't think that you could build a global computer, right? They pointed out all the reasons why it wouldn't work. Oh, it would be slow. Yeah, it is slow, but it still works. Another is Uniswap, right? Uniswap is pretty amazing and really speaks to the power of decentralization, power of software as free speech. Here's a wild idea in code, and you can't stop it. And billions and billions and billions of dollars go through it, right? That really speaks to like what software can be. That's not the end of software, right? Like that's kind of like the beginning. We're going to build a lot of crazy shit, right? And then I think it's DAOs, right? The idea that we can now believe that we have organizations that are incorporated in the internet and are run on the internet. So those are the kind of my three.
Yeah, regarding Uniswap, I had this, I used it, quite many times before, but I had this light bulb moment like a, week or two before when, all the market was crashing and, you had these household names like FreeAC, getting many in problem like BlockFi, Celsius. And I didn't want to put my, Ethereum, I wanted to sell it, so I didn't want to put it on centralized exchange because I was like, you never know. It was so weird, like that you couldn't trust anything. And the fact that I could do it on Uniswap without any risk that someone might take my money because they go bankrupt, like it really made me think like, oh my God, like I don't need to trust anyone.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah.
And especially in times like that, you only can, like a friend in need is a friend indeed. And same here, like, when you cannot trust anyone, then you really appreciate trustless systems.
Yep.
So another question is like, the one that I always ask, like, what has been the thing that was the funnest so far? Something that made you smile, laugh, something that happened either to you or something that you've observed?
NFTs. I love NFTs. I was so early on NFTs. I was trying to build NFTs on Bitcoin in 2013. I love them. I did a project called Pride Punks, which some people love, some people hate. Really, they're the first CryptoPunk derivative. Basically, I made them all gay. There's a long story behind it. I added a rainbow behind them. Some people think that was really stupid. They're like, oh, it's just a rainbow. But actually, it was really amazing, where at the time, no one had made derivatives of crypto art. Everyone believed crypto art was non-fungible. And I just had this wild sort of thinking like, oh, conceptually, I'll make it fungible by just like, forking the idea and tweaking it a bit, right? Making it different. And I'll make like a political statement with it. And it'll be like art. And, it turned out to be the first crypto derivative art project ever. And, I love the project. I just thought it was such a cool idea. But for me, NFTs, everyone today thinks about them for money. And indeed, I sell NFTs. I love selling NFTs. I will continue to sell NFTs. I was an artist before I was a technologist. So art is something that's very close to me. I love that we have made real this idea of buying JPEGs. right? As an artist for a long, long time, you couldn't sell your art without Sotheby's or Christie's or like some gallery saying it was valuable, right? And it's just so wild. People shit on NFTs all the time. They're like, it's just a stupid duck. Yeah, but you know what? Somebody made the duck and now they're paying the rent from the duck. Just so exciting, so fun. Unfortunately, NFTs have become like kind of all about the money, which is kind of sad. I like that people make money from it. I like that they make money from doing something cool or interesting or innovative or new or interesting. I don't really love the fact that like it's just overwhelming with just like nonsense bullshit. That's disappointing. But you know what? That's life. You know what?
Yeah.
You walk down the street and there's counterfeit everything. There's nonsense everywhere. But yeah, definitely NFTs have been the funnest thing because early on, I believed in them and people were like, you're stupid, Dennison. That's dumb. I'm like, no, you'll see. It'll be big. It'll be huge.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Dennison, like, do you have any ideas for people that might be a good fit for the conversation that we had here? Like some ideas for people that I might invite for the podcast?
I would definitely talk to the folks in the Tornado Cash DAO to the degree that they would talk publicly. I would definitely talk to them. I think what they do is fascinating. I have yet to actually personally use Tornado Cash. It's because I'm kind of scared of the government being like, Dennison, why did you use Tornado Cash?
Yeah.
But I love the idea. Privacy is a human right. And I think that is incredibly important. So I would highly recommend them. I think you should definitely talk to the Dope Wars team, maybe the Pride Punks or Seraph team. The Dope Wars team is really cool. They're pretty far along, so they have a lot of learnings. They're probably very useful to speak to. And I think I'm really excited about seeing more DAOs like Dope Wars, where people around the world have an idea. They're into hip hop, no matter where they live. They're into hip hop in the streets and Grand Theft Auto and that kind of stuff. And they're like building a metaverse world around these like ideas. So I would definitely speak to them as well.
Okay, last question. Where people can learn more about Tally? Where should they go? Is it like Twitter, Discord, website, or?
Absolutely. First, you can go to Tally, the website. That's Tally.xyz, Tally.xyz. You can go to our Twitter, which is at Tally.xyz. We have links there to our Discord as well. We have a great podcast called DAO Talk, which is available on Spotify. You should definitely check that out. It's a weekly podcast, just sort of like a roundup and everything happening in DAO land. We have an amazing newsletter written by Nate Parton, who's kind of one of the most well-respected folks in the DAO space. Really, if you want to know what's happening in DeFi DAOs, check out our newsletter. That is an incredible resource.
Okay, so Dennison, like, thanks a lot for coming and sharing a lot of experience that you have gathered through these all crazy years. And, see you on Twitter.